There have been competing claims about what happened on Saturday when 4 Israeli hostages were rescued from Gaza, but hundreds of Palestinians were killed and injured in the process. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the operation heroic. Gazans, on the other hand, are calling it a massacre, with reports of men, women and children being torn to pieces due to heavy bombardment. But one quote-unquote response that stood out to me was from the head of Israel's Hostages and Missing Families Forum medical team, Haggai Levine, who simply described it as not a way we can bring 120 hostages back home. He's right. There are still 120 hostages that remain in Gaza, including 79-year-old Avraham Munder, who was taken captive by Hamas from his kibbutz on October the 7th. Avraham was taken along with his wife, daughter and grandson, all of whom were thankfully released during the hostage deal between Hamas and Israel in November. You remember, the one that got 105 hostages out safely without the deaths of hundreds of Palestinians. In May, Avraham's nephew, Zahiro Shahar Mor, was formally questioned by Israeli police after taking part in anti-government protests calling for a deal to bring the hostages home. The summons marked the first time hostage family members were formally questioned by the Israeli police, but it's become a lot more common since then. So far, Zahiro has been arrested 7 times. Well, as reports suggest that the armed rescue of 4 hostages has undermined the prospects of a ceasefire and a deal for the remaining hostages, Zahiro joins me now from Tel Aviv. Zahiro, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate you taking the time. What is the latest? We've seen 4 hostages freed in this military operation. What is the latest that you're hearing on the other hostages still stuck in Gaza, including your uncle? Have there been any changes, any updates since the weekend?
Well, yeah, naturally, after getting 4 hostages out, the security on the remaining 120 hostages got tightened. And there are rumors, of course, we know this from rumors, but for extreme measures of security upon the remaining 120. And you're quite right. After almost 9, let's say 8 months of fighting, getting out 7 live hostages by heroic military operation is not a course. It's not a plan. It's less than 1 hostage per month. There are 120 hostages. It's 10 years time, according by this pace. It's basically the whole rescue operation is a tactical win for the Israeli side. Of course, we got 4 hostages back alive, and this is great. This is great. I know some of the families, and great relief. But this is not the strategic solution. The strategic solution must come via a deal, negotiating a peace deal. The ceasefire, of course, is the first thing that we must do in order to sit down and talk. And this is not happening. And it's, you know, as many ask me, what has changed after the heroic rescue operation? I tell them nothing. We're on the same place that we were 2 days ago, a week ago, a month ago, 3 months ago even.
Zahiro, you mentioned a ceasefire, and I do want to talk about a ceasefire with you. But before we get to that, let's talk about your uncle. He's nearly 80 years old, Avraham. He can't be doing well in captivity. Tell us a little bit about what he's like.
Abraham is a kind and gentleman, the greatest uncle you can imagine. He taught me how to play backgammon and took me on his back on rides. He's younger than my father. He's my father's younger brother. He's taller than he is. So he was like the fun uncle. He likes to sing. He sings a lot in many choirs, and he's 79 years old. He has trouble walking. He uses a walking cane, and he has poor eyesight and some medical preconditions that you would expect from a 79-year-old. By the way, he celebrated his 79th birthday last December in captivity. Now he's closer to 80. He's pushing on 80 now. It's so long.
That's awful. And we hope for his release. So let's talk about the possibility of release. Joe Biden has put forward what he calls a plan to end this all, a 3-part plan. It just passed in the UN Security Council 14-0. What's interesting is the resolution says that Israel has accepted the plan. And yet, everything I'm seeing in the Israeli media, everything I'm reading from Netanyahu, I feel like I'm going crazy. The Americans are saying Israel's accepted, but I don't see any evidence that the Israeli government, the Netanyahu government, has accepted a plan for a permanent ceasefire. What are you hearing or seeing from the government there?
That's the double talk of the Israeli government, as usual. You say something different inside in Hebrew, and then in English that most people don't understand. They say something completely different. Now, in Israel, it's moreover, this plan was initially called Netanyahu's plan.
Yes.
Okay, this was coming from the Israeli government, and as we have seen in many incidents in the previous months, since the government is reluctant to do what is necessary, what is needed, it's sabotaging its own initiatives. And this is why you're seeing, in Israel, you hear a completely different story about this initiative than in the foreign media.
What do you make of Benjamin Netanyahu's approach to all of this? He's delighted at his rescue operation. He turned up to meet the 4 freed hostages when they got back. He says he's all about saving the hostages. How do you think Netanyahu's performed since October the 7th? Has he done everything he can to save hostages like your uncle? Has he listened to your concerns and the concerns of other family members?
180 degrees. He and the government always choose the wrong way, and always, ever since October 8th. Okay, everything they do is directed at not getting the hostages back. This is the plain truth. They had many opportunities to sign a deal. They're always sabotaging their own initiatives. When people from the professional, the negotiating team itself are crying out loud, this thing can't go on. We're sabotaging our own moves, and this is the reality for the past 9 months. Okay? This is why we didn't get any hostages back alive during this period after the initial hostage exchange deal that was also got exploded because on the last day, instead of keeping it, going on and releasing some more and getting, remediating the situation further. I'm really appalled by the way the government is dealing with this kind of hot situation. This is why we're so, we're thrilled to see the American initiative, because this gives us hope. The way the Israeli government is conducting gives us little hope, little to no hope. As I said, 7 hostages in 8 months during military operation. And by the way, as you mentioned, Netanyahu was the first to jump on the photo app and push himself inside the frame with his, as he said, called it heroic military operation. The other that came back during the hostage deal didn't get a visit. It's not such a good photo op, apparently, for his base to see people coming alive and well in a deal.
Yes,
it is good to see heroic actions and to
yes, in which hundreds of Palestinians are killed. Let me ask you this.
Oh.
There have been reports that there was an offer from Hamas shortly after October the 7th to return the hostages as part of a prisoner swap, and if there was a guarantee of no ground invasion of Gaza. One of the former spokespersons for the Hostages Families Forum has said this. Is that what you've heard as well? Do you believe there was a deal that could have been done to get your uncle back last October?
Yes, sir. I do believe. Furthermore, when my cousin Karen was taken to Gaza, she was freed on the 49th day, Abraham's daughter, together with her mom and her son. Their captor told them when they entered the Gaza, don't worry, don't be too nervous. 1 or 2 days, you'll be back home. Nobody thought that it would take this long. Nobody thought that Israel would go berserk and just
Yeah.
everybody thought that this would be this would come out as an exchange for people for people before firing starts, but Israel rushed into war and chose revenge instead of life, and this is why we are getting hostages in body bags. By the way, I have to remind you that even though the IDF rescued 7 hostages in the military operation, it also killed or got hostages killed in at least 14 cases that we know. So this is not a good ratio, even from this aspect.
One of the freed hostages from February was quoted recently as saying his greatest fear while being held hostage in Gaza was Israeli warplanes. That's what he said. There's an irony that the American government and the American public think they're supporting Israel get the hostages back by sending American weaponry to Israel to defend itself. And yet, a lot of the hostages' families, people like yourself, have been pushing for a ceasefire, urging Biden to get a ceasefire. What is your message to Joe Biden and the American public when it comes to the hostages?
This is completely true. I'll quote my 9-year-old cousin's son, Ohad, when he was asked after being in Hamas captivity and after his grandfather is still there, he was asked in some interview, knowing what you know about the Gazan condition, what do you fear the most? He answered instantly, the IDF bombing.
Wow.
This is the thing that frightens him the most. Look, even if an IDF bomb will hit a nearby building, okay, there is a chance that the captors would get nervous, would think they need to move out of the area. And in this case, they are supposed to kill the hostages they are guarding. And so, and quite frankly, I think this scenario already happened several times. Maybe we will never know.
So what you're saying very clearly, Zahiro, is that the Israeli government says that the military approach is the best way to get the hostages back, applying military pressure, and you're saying, no, that's the worst approach.
Precisely so. Precisely so. 100%. No question about it. Again, numbers talk. I know this is horrid, but body count: 7 hostages alive, 14 dead, at least.
Yeah.
And no one was released. 105 hostages were released in the hostage deal.
Yeah.
With no harm done, with Red Cross vans taking them, and everyone who
it was the solution. It was the solution.
This is a solution. This is a strategic solution, a plan.
Yeah.
Not some anecdote.
Last question for you, Zahiro. When asked if bringing the hostages home was the most important thing on the agenda, Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said recently, and I quote, "No, it's not the most important thing. Why do you want competition? Everything is important." When you hear Israeli ministers say the hostages are not the priority, when you have Israeli police deployed on the streets to arrest people like yourself, protesting for the hostages, how does that make you feel as an Israeli?
Betrayed. The way I say it, the Israeli government is being taken hostage by the die-hard right-wing extremist fundamentalists. And yes, we do have some fundamentalists in Israel society. And the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, is definitely one of them. And they are, keeping the government from doing the right thing, and they are whipping their base on everything. For me, this is the battle that Israel society is facing right now, and it's far more important than the battle against Hamas. Hamas, let me remind you, has some Kalashnikov and RPG. Israel has warships, submarines, F-15s, F-18, completely different level of operation. And this is not a fight for Israel existence, this fight in Gaza. The fight that we are seeing on the streets now between the die-hard right-wing extremists want to take this whole region into a spiral of violence. And us, the people who cherish life and cherish, the values of human life and of
Yeah.
taking hostages alive, getting them back to their families. This is one of the highest moral values you can think of. And Bezalel Smotrich disregarding this as not the most important thing is in my eyes, is horrendous.
Horrendous indeed. We will have to leave it there. Zahiro, thank you so much for your time. We hope and
Very much.
pray that all of the hostages, including your uncle, are released safely and that this violence and war and conflict ends as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mehdi.